Celia Wainwright sat by the enormous bay window of her family's mansion, gazing out at the manicured lawns and the distant glint of the city skyline. The world outside seemed so vast, so free. Yet she felt utterly confined within the ornate walls of her home. The Wainwright family was one of the most powerful in the city, with old money, prestigious connections, and a rigid sense of tradition. At 27, Celia was at the age when her family expected her to settle down with someone of equal stature, a man who would complement the Wainwright legacy. There had been a string of suitors, all of them wealthy, successful, and utterly boring. Celia, however, longed for something more. Something real. Something beyond the empty conversations at society galas and the cold exchanges of business alliances masquerading as love. "Celia, darling, are you listening?" Her mother, Beatrice Wainwright, asked from across the parlor. Beatrice was the epitome of high society, always impeccably dressed, with a sharp gaze that missed nothing. Celia snapped out of her reverie. "Sorry, mother. What were you saying?" Beatrice sighed, a sound of mild frustration. "I was talking about Charles Whitmore. He's invited us to the country club next weekend. I think it's time you considered him seriously. He comes from a good family, and his father owns half the city's real estate. It's a perfect match." A perfect match. Celia had heard those words 100 times before. But none of the men her mother paraded before her felt perfect. They felt safe, calculated, like chess pieces moving in some elaborate game of status and power. "I'll think about it," Celia replied, knowing it was a lie. The last thing she wanted was to be with Charles Whitmore or anyone like him. She wanted freedom, not a life dictated by expectations and wealth. The next weekend, against her will, Celia found herself attending yet another dull family function. On the way back, tired of the stifling atmosphere and longing for some solitude, she decided to take the scenic route through the countryside. It was a rare, impulsive decision, a moment of rebellion against a carefully crafted life she had always known. But halfway through the winding roads, her car sputtered and came to a sudden stop. She tried turning the ignition again, but it was no use. She was stranded in the middle of nowhere, with no signal on her phone and no clue how to fix the car. Frustration mounting, she stepped out and started walking toward the nearest town she had passed earlier. It was a small, humble place, a far cry from the grandeur of the Wainwright estate. As she walked, she spotted a man working in front of a small, weathered building that appeared to be a workshop. He was tall, with tousled dark hair and a rugged, handsome face. He wore a plain t-shirt and jeans, his hands stained with grease. Seeing her approach, he wiped his hands on a rag and walked toward her with a friendly smile. "Car trouble?" Celia hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Yes, it just stopped working. I don't know what's wrong." He nodded thoughtfully. "I can take a look. I'm Noah, by the way." "Celia," she replied, surprised at the warmth in his tone. It was different from the polite but distant way men usually addressed her. There was something disarming about his sincerity. Noah followed her back to the car and quickly diagnosed the problem. "It's a busted alternator," he said. "I can fix it, but it'll take a couple of hours. I have the part in my shop, though." "Thank you so much," Celia said, relieved. "I don't know what I would have done otherwise." As Noah worked, Celia found herself lingering around the shop, watching him. There was something about the simplicity of the place that appealed to her, the wooden tools lining the walls, the smell of sawdust and metal. It was so far from the cold, sterile environment she was used to. "How did you end up out here?" Noah asked, glancing up from the car. Celia laughed softly. "I got lost, I think. I'm supposed to be back in the city by now." "The city, huh?" Noah said with a knowing smile. "I figured you weren't from around here." She looked at him, wondering what he meant. "What gave me away?" "Well, for starters, your car is a bit fancier than what we usually see around here," he said with a grin. "But more than that, you just don't seem like someone who belongs in a place like this." The words stung more than she expected, though she knew he hadn't meant them as an insult. She didn't belong here, in this small, unremarkable town. And yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was exactly the kind of place she wanted to be. Maybe I don't belong anywhere, she murmured, more to herself than to Noah. He looked at her curiously but didn't press further. Chapter 3. An Unlikely Friendship. Over the next few weeks, Celia found herself thinking about Noah more often than she expected. His kindness, his honesty, his simple way of living, it all fascinated her. She made excuses to drive back to the small town, telling herself it was for the fresh air and the escape from her suffocating life. But deep down, she knew she was going back to see Noah. Each time she visited, they spent more time together. Noah showed her around his workshop, explaining the intricacies of carpentry, sharing stories about the town, and teaching her how to work with her hands, something she had never done before. In return, she told him about her life, though she kept the details vague, not wanting to reveal just how wealthy and privileged she was. It felt good to be seen as just Celia, not Celia Wainwright, the heiress. Noah, for his part, was drawn to her in ways he couldn't explain. She was unlike anyone he had ever met, graceful yet down to earth, intelligent but with a hint of sadness behind her eyes. Despite the differences in their lives, there was an undeniable connection between them. One afternoon, as they sat on the porch of his workshop, Noah looked at her with a seriousness that made her heart race. Celia, I know there's more to you than you're telling me. I can see it in your eyes. You're not just some lost girl passing through town, are you? Celia hesitated. She had been dreading this moment. The moment when she would have to decide whether to tell him the truth or keep hiding behind the facade. But she couldn't lie to Noah, not anymore. I come from a family of wealth, she admitted quietly. A very wealthy family. My parents have certain expectations for me. Marry the right man. Live the right life. But it's not what I want. Noah didn't seem surprised. I figured as much, he said softly. But that doesn't change anything for me. Celia looked at him, surprised. It doesn't? No, he said firmly. What matters is who you are, not where you come from. Chapter 4. Family Disapproval. Celia's growing connection with Noah didn't go unnoticed. Her mother, always keenly aware of Celia's whereabouts, began to suspect something was amiss. One evening, after another tiresome dinner with potential suitors, Beatrice confronted her daughter. Where have you been disappearing to, Celia? She asked, her tone sharp. I've heard rumors that you've been spending time in some small town with a man. Celia's heart raced, but she held her ground. I've met someone, Mother. His name is Noah. He's kind and hardworking, and I care about him. Beatrice's expression hardened. Care about him? Celia, you cannot be serious. This man is beneath you. Do you have any idea what people will say? What it will do to our family's reputation? It doesn't matter. Celia shot back, her voice trembling with emotion. I love him. The word slipped out before she could stop it. Love. It was the first time she had admitted it, even to herself. Her mother's face twisted with disdain. You don't know what you're saying. This infatuation will pass. You will marry someone appropriate, someone worthy of your station. If you don't, you can consider yourself cut off from this family. Celia's blood ran cold. She had always known her family's love was conditional, but hearing it spoken so plainly shook her to her core. Could she really walk away from the life she had always known? From the security and privilege that came with being a Wainwright? But then she thought of Noah, of his laughter, his warmth, the way he made her feel like she mattered for who she was, not what she represented. Could she really give that up? Noah had his own doubts. As much as he loved Celia, he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't enough for her. How could he ever provide the life she was accustomed to? He was just a carpenter, living paycheck to paycheck. What could he offer her besides love? One evening, after a particularly grueling day at work, Noah sat with Celia on the porch of his small home, the weight of his insecurities pressing heavily on him. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over the small town. But Noah's heart was burdened with doubt. "Celia," he began, his voice low and uncertain, "I need to ask you something." She turned to him, sensing the seriousness in his tone. "What is it?" He ran a hand through his hair, gathering his thoughts. "Are you sure about this? About us?" His eyes searched hers, filled with a vulnerability she had never seen before. "I mean, look at your life and look at mine. You're used to luxury, comfort, things I could never give you. I don't want to be the reason you give all that up." Celia reached for his hand, her touch gentle but firm. "Noah, I don't care about those things. They don't make me happy. You make me happy." She paused, trying to find the right words to convey the depth of her feelings. "For the first time in my life, I feel like I can breathe. With you, I'm not the Wainwright heiress. I'm just me." Noah sighed, torn between his love for her and the harsh realities of their situation. "But what about your family? They'll never accept me. They'll make things hard for you. You'll lose everything." Celia smiled sadly, knowing that he was right. Her family's disapproval was fierce and unwavering, and her mother's ultimatum still echoed in her mind. But she had made her decision. "I've already lost everything that matters if I walk away from you," she said softly. "I've lived my whole life trying to please my parents, following their rules, their expectations, and it's made me miserable. I'm not going to lose you just because they don't approve. I choose you, Noah." Noah stared at her, his heart swelling with love and admiration. He had never imagined someone like Celia would choose him over the life of privilege she was born into. And yet, here she was, willing to sacrifice everything for him, for them. "You don't know what that means to me," he whispered, pulling her into his arms. They sat together in silence for a long time, the weight of their decision hanging between them. There would be consequences, but in that moment, all that mattered was their love. Celia's decision to choose Noah over her family didn't come without fallout. The next day, she returned to her family's estate to face her parents one last time. She knew it would be a difficult conversation, but she was determined to stand her ground. When she walked into the grand foyer, her father, Richard Wainwright, was waiting for her. He stood by the fireplace, his expression cold and unreadable. Her mother sat nearby, her lips pursed in disapproval. "So, you've made your choice," her father said without preamble. Celia nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. "Yes, I have." Her father's eyes narrowed. "You understand what this means, don't you? If you continue this relationship, you will no longer be a part of this family. You'll lose your inheritance, your status, everything." "I understand," Celia replied, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside her. Beatrice spoke next, her voice sharp and cutting. "Celia, don't be foolish. This man cannot provide for you. He's beneath you. You'll regret this decision." Celia met her mother's gaze, her resolve hardening. "What I regret is living my life according to someone else's rules. I love Noah, and I'm willing to walk away from everything if that's what it takes." Her father's face twisted in anger. "Then get out. You're no longer welcome in this house." The finality of his words hit her like a blow, but Celia held her head high. She had expected this, and though it hurt, she knew she was making the right choice. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the mansion, leaving behind the life she had. The weeks that followed were challenging. Celia moved into Noah's small house, and for the first time in her life, she had to learn how to live without the luxuries she had always taken for granted. Gone were the servants, the extravagant dinners, and the designer clothes. In their place were simple meals, hard work, and a kind of freedom she had never experienced before. Celia took a job at a local flower shop, enjoying the satisfaction of working with her hands and being part of the town's close-knit community. Noah continued his carpentry work, and though they didn't have much in the way of material wealth, they were happy, truly happy. Their love grew stronger with each passing day. They spent their evenings together, talking, laughing, and dreaming of the future. It was a life that was worlds away from the one Celia had been raised in. But it was a life filled with love, trust, and genuine connection. Still, there were moments of doubt, moments when Celia missed her family or wondered what her life would have been like if she had chosen the path they had laid out for her. But those moments were fleeting. In Noah's arms, she found a sense of belonging that she had never felt before. A year later, life was simple but full of joy. Celia and Noah had built a life together, one rooted in love and mutual respect. They had weathered the challenges of adjusting to their new reality. And in doing so, they had grown even closer. One afternoon, as they sat in the garden outside their home, Noah took her hand in his and smiled. "You know, I was scared for a long time, scared that I couldn't give you the life you deserved. But I realize now that what matters isn't the money or the status. It's this." He gestured around them, to their modest but cozy home, to the garden they had planted together. "It's us." Celia smiled, her heart swelling with love for the man who had changed her life. "I never wanted anything else," she said softly. "This is where I belong." They sat in silence for a moment, enjoying the peacefulness of the evening. Celia leaned her head on Noah's shoulder, feeling a deep sense of contentment. She had chosen love, and though the road had been difficult, it had been worth it. Years later, Celia and Noah's life had become a beautiful tapestry of shared experiences, love, and growth. Their home, though modest, was filled with warmth and laughter. They had started a small business together, Noah building furniture and Celia helping to run the shop. It wasn't the life she had imagined growing up, but it was better in every way that mattered. Occasionally, she would hear news about her family from distant acquaintances. Her father's business empire continued to thrive, and her mother remained the queen of high society. But Celia had no regrets about the path she had chosen. Her family had never reached out to her after she left, but she had found a new family in Noah and in the community they had become a part of. She was no longer the Wainwright heiress, but she was something far more important. A woman who had chosen her own happiness, who had built a life of love and authenticity. And as she stood on the porch of their home one evening, watching the sun set over the hills, Celia knew, with absolute certainty, that she had made the right choice. She had found her freedom, and she had found her love, against all odds. The moral of the story is that true happiness comes from following your heart and choosing love, authenticity, and personal fulfillment over societal expectations. Wealth or status, material wealth and privilege cannot replace the deeper, more meaningful connections we make with others, and sometimes, real freedom and happiness come from stepping away from what others expect of us to pursue a life of genuine love and self-fulfillment. What do you think about the story? Please let me see your opinion in the comment section. Please subscribe to my channel for more interesting stories. Comment, like, and share. See you in my next video. Bye!